They say for richer or for poorer. But let's be honest, those vows usually have an invisible expiration date. For Audrey's husband, Grant, that date was October 14th, the day her credit score hit 420 and the foreclosure notice was taped to their front door in plain view of the neighbors. He didn't just leave her, he discarded her like a depreciating asset. He told her she was bad for his brand. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It's the only place solid enough to build a foundation. Grant didn't know that 3 weeks after he walked out, a lawyer from Zurich would land at JFK with a briefcase that would change the global economy and Audrey's life forever. He divorced a waitress. He was about to regret leaving an empress. The silence in the kitchen wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. Audrey stared at the bank statement on the granite island, a stark white sheet of paper that effectively declared her life over. The number at the bottom was in parentheses, red and ugly, 42,389 salzols. And that was just the business account. The personal savings were drained. The maxed-out Amex Black card was sitting in a drawer she was too afraid to open. "Audrey?" Grant walked in, adjusting his cufflinks. He was wearing the navy bespoke suit he'd picked up in Savile Row last year, back when Audrey's marketing firm, Archer & Vine, was the darling of the San Francisco startup scene. Back before the lawsuit, before the supply chain collapse, before her mother's Alzheimer's care started costing $6,000 a month. "We need to talk," Audrey said, her voice trembling. She hated how small she sounded. She was 34 years old, a woman who had built a company from a laptop in a Starbucks, yet in front of Grant, she felt like a child who had broken a vase. Grant didn't look at her. He looked at his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus. "I can't right now, Aud. I have a breakfast meeting with the partners at Sterling Holloway. If I'm late, it looks sloppy." "They're foreclosing on the house, Grant," she blurted out. He stopped. His hand hovered over his car keys. Finally he turned. His face wasn't filled with shock or sympathy. It was filled with exhaustion, and something worse, disgust. "I told you," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I told you 6 months ago to liquidate the firm. I told you to cut your mother's care expenses and put her in a state facility. You didn't listen." "I couldn't put my mother in a state home, Grant. She wouldn't survive a week." Audrey stood up, gripping the edge of the counter. "And the firm, it's my life. I just needed a bridge loan. If you could just sign as a guarantor." "No." The word hung in the air. "Grant, we are married. We are partners." "We were partners when you were an asset," he said, the mask finally slipping. "Right now, you're a liability. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to explain to my board why my wife is being sued for breach of contract? Do you know what it does to my stock options when creditors are calling my office looking for you?" He walked over to the counter, picked up his keys, and looked her dead in the eye. "I'm staying at the Four Seasons tonight. Don't wait up." He walked out. Audrey heard the engine of his Porsche 911 roar to life, a car that cost more than the debt that was currently drowning her. She collapsed onto the floor, the cold tile against her cheek, and for the first time in her life, she didn't just feel broke. She felt worthless. The reality of her situation was a physical weight. Her father was a man she'd never met, a casual fling her mother had in the late 80s while backpacking through Europe. Her mother had raised her on a waitress's salary in Ohio. Audrey had clawed her way up through scholarships and sleepless nights, building Archer & Vine from nothing. She thought she had beaten the odds. She thought marrying Grant, a scion of a Boston banking family, was the finish line. But money doesn't just buy things, it buys distance. And Grant had been distancing himself from the moment the first check bounced. That night, the power was cut. Audrey sat in the dark, lighting a vanilla candle, one of the few luxury items she hadn't sold on eBay yet, and ate peanut butter out of the jar. She fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in a coat, shivering not from the cold, but from the terror of what tomorrow would bring. The divorce papers didn't come by mail. They were hand-delivered by a courier at 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 days after Grant walked out. Audrey opened the thick manila envelope with trembling hands. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Grant T. Sterling. Respondent, Audrey J. Sterling. He hadn't just filed, he had gone for the throat. He was citing irreconcilable financial infidelity. He was asking for a complete separation of assets, which was a joke, because she had no assets, only debt. But the kicker, the part that made her rush to the bathroom to vomit, was the clause about spousal support. The petitioner requests that no spousal support be awarded to the respondent, citing the respondent's gross mismanagement of shared funds and reckless business practices. He was cutting her off, completely. She called him. Straight to voicemail. She called his office. His assistant, Jessica, a girl Audrey had taken out for drinks, whose birthday she had remembered when Grant forgot, answered in a tone so chilly Audrey could feel the frost through the phone. Mr. Sterling is in a meeting and cannot be disturbed. He has instructed that all future communications go through his legal counsel, Mr. Beatrice. Jessica, please, Audrey begged, hating herself for it. I have nowhere to go. The house is locked up. The bank took the car this morning. I'm at a coffee shop on 4th Street with 2 suitcases. I just need to speak to him. Mr. Beatrice's number is 555-0192, Jessica said, and hung up. The next 2 weeks were a blur of humiliation. Audrey moved into a motel in Daly City, not a boutique motel, a place where the carpet was sticky and the neighbors screamed at each other at 3 a.m. She sold her engagement ring. It was a 2-carat Tiffany diamond. She got $4,500 for it from a pawn shop downtown because she didn't have the time or the paperwork to sell it properly. That money went immediately to the nursing home to keep her mother, Evelyn, in her room for 1 more month. Audrey couldn't tell her what was happening. Her dementia was advanced. She still thought Audrey was in high school. Every time Audrey visited, she'd ask, "Did you finish your homework, Audrey?" "Yes, Mama," Audrey would say, holding her frail hand, hiding the fact that she was sleeping in her clothes. "I finished it." She looked for jobs. She had been a CEO. She had been featured in Forbes' 30 under 30 list 5 years ago. Now she was unhireable. Her credit check was a red flag. The lawsuit against her company was public record. She applied for marketing director roles, then manager roles, then associate roles. Nothing. She eventually took a job as a night shift waitress at a 24-hour diner near the airport. It was a cosmic joke. She was back where her mother started. The uniform was polyester and smelled like old fryer grease. One rainy Tuesday night in November, about 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Grant came in. He didn't see her at first. He was with a woman, tall, blonde, impeccable. She was wearing a cream cashmere coat that probably cost more than Audrey's mother's entire year of care. It was Chloe Sutton, the daughter of a real estate mogul. Audrey knew her. They used to go to Pilates together. Audrey froze behind the counter, holding a pot of coffee. Grant looked happy. He looked lighter. He was laughing at something she said, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. He looked like a man who had successfully cut a tumor out of his life. She should have hidden. She should have asked another waitress to take their table. But a strange, cold fire ignited in her chest. She walked over. "Coffee?" she asked. Grant looked up. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and waxy. Chloe looked at her, squinting, trying to place the face. Then her eyes widened in recognition. "Audrey," she gasped. "Oh my God, are you working here?" "I am," Audrey said, her voice steady. "The tips are surprisingly good, and the overhead is low." Grant cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He looked at the menu, then at the table, then out the window. "We'll just have 2 waters. To go." "Grant," she said, leaning in slightly. "You look good. Stress-free." "Audrey, don't," he hissed, finally looking at her. His eyes were hard. "Don't make a scene. You brought this on yourself. You know that." "Did I?" she asked. "I brought the market crash. I brought Mum's illness." "You refuse to cut your losses," he said coldly. "Winners know when to quit. Losers drag everyone down with them. I wasn't going to let you drown me, too." He threw a $20 bill on the table, pity money, and grabbed Chloe's arm. "Let's go." Audrey watched them leave. She watched him open the door of his Porsche for her. She watched the taillights fade into the rainy night. She looked down at the $20 bill. She wanted to rip it up. She wanted to burn it. Instead, she put it in her apron pocket. She needed the money for toothpaste. She went back to the counter, her heart feeling like a stone. Winners know when to quit. That was Grant's mantra. The diner door opened again. A gust of cold wind blew in. She didn't look up. "Sit anywhere you like. I'll be with you in a minute." "I am looking for Ms. Audrey Calloway," a deep, accented voice said. Audrey paused. She hadn't used her maiden name, Calloway, in 5 years. She turned around. Standing there was a man who looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a G7 summit. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. He had silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and he was holding a briefcase made of leather so fine it looked like liquid chocolate. Behind him stood 2 younger men in dark suits, looking like Secret Service agents. The diner went quiet. The line cook stopped scraping the grill. "I'm Audrey Calloway," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Who are you? If this is about the bank loan, I already told them." "I am not from the bank, Miss Calloway," the man said. He stepped forward, removing his leather gloves with precise, slow movements. "My name is Arthur Pennyworth. I am the senior executor for the firm, Sterling, Blackwood and Finch, in Zurich." "Zurich," she frowned. "I don't know anyone in Zurich." "No," Pennyworth said. His eyes were kind, but intense. "But you knew your mother traveled to Europe in 1987, did you not?" Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes." "What is this about?" Pennyworth gestured to the booth Grant had just vacated. "May we sit? This is a matter of extreme sensitivity. And," he glanced at the grease-stained menu, "it regards a substantial change in your circumstances." Audrey sat down. Pennyworth placed the briefcase on the table and clicked the gold latches open. "Ms. Calloway," he began, "5 days ago, a man named Silas Blackwood passed away in his estate in the Swiss Alps. Mr. Blackwood was a very private, very powerful man. He had no wife. He had no legitimate children on public record. However, in his final days, he amended his will to acknowledge a paternity test conducted in secret 36 years ago. He slid a document across the table. It was heavy, cream-colored paper with a wax seal. Silas Blackwood was the majority shareholder of Blackwood Logistics. They control approximately 40% of the maritime shipping lanes in the Northern Hemisphere. They own the ports in Rotterdam, Singapore, and extensive real estate holdings in London and New York. She stared at him. I don't understand. Mr. Blackwood was your father, Audrey, Pennyworth said softly. And you are his sole heir. He paused, letting the words settle in the smell of bacon and old coffee. The lawyers are still calculating the total liquidity, but the initial valuation of the estate, including the controlling interest in the company, is estimated at approximately $12 billion. The world stopped. The hum of the refrigerator, the rain against the glass, the beating of her own heart. It all went silent. 12, she whispered. Billion, Pennyworth corrected, with a B. And there is one more thing. The board of directors is meeting in New York in 3 days to try and seize control. They believe the heir is a myth. Mr. Blackwood's dying wish was that you take your seat at the head of the table. He left you a letter. He handed her a smaller envelope. On the front, in shaky handwriting, was written, "To my daughter, whom I failed." Audrey looked at the $20 bill Grant had left her, still poking out of her apron. Then she looked at the multi-billion-dollar portfolio on the table. "Mr. Pennyworth," she said, her voice finding a strength she hadn't felt in years. "Wait while I untie this apron." The Gulfstream G650 didn't just fly, it glided through the stratosphere like a silver bullet. The interior smelled of bergamot and fresh leather. Audrey sat in a swivel chair that was wider than the bed she'd slept in for the last month, staring out the window at the Atlantic Ocean far below. In the span of 4 hours, her life had dissolved and reformed. She had quit the diner. She had packed her 2 suitcases. And most importantly, she had authorized Arthur Pennyworth to transfer her mother, Evelyn, to the Cedars, a neurological care facility in Switzerland that cost $20,000 a week. They had a specialized memory unit. She was already on a medical transport plane ahead of them. Audrey wasn't doing this for the yachts or the diamonds. She was doing it for her mother. And, if she was being honest, she was doing it for the woman Grant Sterling had called a liability. "Miss Calloway?" Pennyworth placed a steaming cup of tea on the table beside her. "We land in Teterboro in 3 hours. You need to read the briefing. The board of directors isn't expecting a family reunion. They are expecting a hostile takeover." "Who are they?" she asked, picking up the heavy binder he had prepared. "Vultures," Pennyworth said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The ringleader is Charles Whitmore. He was your father's COO. He's been running Blackwood Logistics as the interim CEO for the last 6 months, while Silas was indisposed. Whitmore believes the empire is his by right of succession. He plans to announce a merger with a rival firm, Triton Global, on Friday. If he signs that deal, your majority shares get diluted. You lose control before you even step in the door." "So I have to stop a merger," she said, flipping through the pages. "I ran a marketing firm, Arthur. I didn't manage global shipping fleets." "Business is business, Miss Calloway. The scale changes, but the sharks swim the same way. And you have something Whitmore doesn't." "What's that?" "You have your father's instincts, and you have nothing to lose. Whitmore is terrified of losing his status. You have already lost everything. That makes you dangerous." Audrey opened the binder. It was dense. Financial reports, supply chain maps, personnel files. But as she read, a strange familiarity washed over her. Her failed company, Archer and Vine, had died because of supply chain collapse during the global shipping crisis. She had spent 2 years obsessing over shipping containers, port delays, and tariff loopholes trying to save her business. She wasn't a novice. She was a casualty of the very industry she now owned. She pointed to a graph on page 42. "This margin squeeze here," she said, tapping the paper. "Whitmore is artificially inflating operating costs in the Rotterdam port to lower the stock price. He's trying to make the company look cheaper so Triton Global can buy it at a discount. It's a classic poison pill strategy, but he's doing it to his own company to facilitate a buyout he'll likely get a kickback on. Pennyworth smiled. It was a small, sharp thing. Precisely. Your father knew you were sharp. He watched you, you know, from a distance. If he watched me, she said, the bitterness rising in her throat, then he watched me lose my house. He watched me scrub tables. He watched Grant humiliate me. He did, Pennyworth admitted quietly, and it broke his heart. But Silas had enemies, dangerous ones. If he had claimed you publicly while he was alive, you would have been a target. He wanted you to build your own armor first. He wrote in his letter that he regretted waiting too long. He ran out of time. She touched the letter in her pocket. She hadn't opened it yet. She wasn't ready to hear the voice of a father who had been a ghost her entire life. "We are going to New York," she said, closing the binder. "I need a wardrobe, I need a haircut, and I need to know everyone's weakness in that boardroom." "Already arranged," Pennyworth said. "A stylist will meet us at the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue. You have a stylist, a speech coach, and a forensic accountant waiting." When they landed, the transformation began. It wasn't like the movies where the girl tries on fun dresses to pop music. This was tactical. The stylist, a severe French woman named Solange, didn't ask what Audrey liked. She looked at her bone structure and said, "Power." She cut Audrey's hair into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that highlighted her jawline. She put her in a structured Alexander McQueen suit, charcoal grey, sharp shoulders, no jewellery except a vintage Cartier tank watch that had belonged to Silas. When Audrey looked in the mirror, she didn't see the waitress who smelled like grease. She didn't see the weeping wife begging Grant for a loan. She saw a predator. "One last thing," Pennyworth said, handing her a file. "We did a background check on your ex-husband, as a precaution." She stiffened. "Why?" "Because Charles Whitmore is looking for leverage. He will find out about your divorce. He will try to use your financial failure to prove you are incompetent to lead. We need to control the narrative." Audrey opened the file. It was a list of Grant's recent investments. He was heavily leveraged in tech stocks that were currently tanking, and... She paused. "He's banking with Sterling Holloway," she said. "That's his family firm." "Look closer," Pennyworth said. She squinted at the fine print. Grant's firm had just secured a massive loan to cover their liquidity issues. The loan was underwritten by a private equity arm, Blackwood Capital. She looked up at Pennyworth. "My father's company owns my ex-husband's debt." "Technically you own his debt now," Pennyworth corrected. "Grant Sterling thinks he answers to the bank. In reality, he answers to you." A slow, cold smile spread across her face. It was the first time she had smiled genuinely in months. "Let's go to the meeting," she said. The headquarters of Blackwood Logistics was a 70-story monolith of black glass in lower Manhattan. It looked like a fortress. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. It was 9:05 when the elevator doors slid open on the executive floor. Pennyworth walked beside Audrey, flanked by 2 security guards. The receptionist, a young man who looked like he was hired for his cheekbones, stood up in alarm. "Excuse me, you can't be up here. The board is in a closed session." "I am the session," Audrey said, not breaking stride. Pennyworth pushed open the double mahogany doors. The room was vast. A table the length of a bowling lane dominated the center. 12 men and 2 women sat around it. At the head of the table sat Charles Whitmore. He was a bull of a man, red-faced, with silver hair slicked back. He was in the middle of a speech. "And that is why the immediate sale to Triton is our only viable path to stability. Silas is gone. We have no leadership. We need..." He stopped as Audrey walked in. The room went dead silent. "Who the hell are you?" Whitmore barked, standing up. "Security!" "Sit down, Charles," Pennyworth said, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. "And tell security to stand down unless they want to be terminated for obstructing the majority shareholder." Murmurs erupted around the table. "Shareholder? What is this?" Audrey walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, her father's chair. She didn't sit. She placed her hands on the leather backing and looked at them. "My name is Audrey Blackwood Calloway." She lied about the hyphen, but it sounded better. "I am Silas Blackwood's daughter, and as of 72 hours ago, I am the owner of 51% of this company." Whitmore laughed. It was a nervous, hacking sound. "This is absurd. Silas had no children. This is a con." Pennyworth slid a stack of documents down the table. DNA results, verified by 3 independent labs, the last will and testament, notarized in Zurich, and the transfer of deed. Whitmore snatched the papers. As he read, his face turned from red to a pale, sickly grey. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Even if this is true," Whitmore sneered, shifting his tactic, "owning shares doesn't make you capable. We are a global logistics firm, not a whatever it is you do. I looked you up, Ms. Calloway. You're a failed marketing consultant from San Francisco. You have a bankruptcy on your record. Your husband divorced you for financial incompetence." The room gasped. She saw the other board members exchanging worried glances. He had done his homework. He was trying to humiliate her, just like Grant had. But he made a mistake. He thought she was ashamed. "You're right, Mr. Whitmore," Audrey said, her voice calm, projecting to the back of the room. "I did fail. My company collapsed because the global supply chain broke. I lost everything because containers were stuck in Long Beach and tariffs tripled overnight." She began to walk slowly around the table, making eye contact with every board member. "I know what it feels like to be the customer on the other end of your inefficiency. I know that under your leadership, Charles, Blackwood Logistics has seen a 14% increase in lost cargo claims. I know that our Rotterdam hub is bleeding money because you refuse to automate the gantry cranes." She stopped behind Whitmore's chair. "You call me incompetent. I spent the last 2 years fighting the mess you helped create. You view these ships as numbers on a spreadsheet. I view them as the lifelines they are. You want to sell to Triton because you don't know how to fix the bleeding. You want a golden parachute." She leaned down, close to his ear. "I don't need a parachute, Charles. I know how to fly the plane." She straightened up and looked at the board. "The merger with Triton is off the table. Instead, we are going to restructure the European division. We are going to implement the automation override in Rotterdam immediately, and we are going to audit the executive expenses for the last 5 years." She looked directly at Whitmore, starting with the CEO's discretionary fund. Whitmore slammed his hand on the table. "You can't do this. I am the chairman. You need a board vote to remove me." "Actually," Pennyworth interjected, adjusting his glasses, "according to the corporate bylaws, the majority shareholder can remove the interim CEO without a vote during a time of emergency transition. Silas wrote that clause himself." "You're fired, Charles," Audrey said. "Pack your things. You have an hour." For a second, nobody moved. The tension was so thick it felt physical. Then, one of the board members, a woman with sharp eyes named Diana, slowly closed her folder on the Triton merger. "Seconded," she said quietly. Another member stammered. "I accept the new direction." Whitmore looked around, realizing his power had evaporated in minutes. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, muttering obscenities. Audrey sat down in her father's chair. The leather was still warm. She looked at the 12 strangers staring at her, waiting for orders. Her hands were shaking beneath the table, but she clasped them together so hard her knuckles turned white. "Now," she said, opening her binder. "Let's talk about the Q4 projections. They're unacceptable." The meeting lasted 6 hours. By the time it ended, her brain felt like it was melting, but she had established dominance. She hadn't just survived, she had led. She retreated to the CEO's office, a room the size of her old house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Empire State Building. She collapsed onto the sofa, kicking off her heels. "You did well," Pennyworth said, pouring a drink from the crystal decanter. "I was terrified," she admitted. "That's why you did well. Only fools are fearless." Her phone buzzed. She had a new phone, encrypted, but she had kept her old number active, just in case. It was a text from Jessica, Grant's assistant. "Audrey, I don't know what's going on, but Grant is freaking out. He just saw a news alert on Bloomberg about a mystery heiress taking over Blackwood. He's asking if I have your new number. What should I tell him?" Audrey stared at the screen. The news cycle moved fast. "Arthur," she said, "is the press release out?" "It went live 10 minutes ago. Daughter of late tycoon Silas Blackwood emerges as new chairwoman." "Does it mention my name?" "It does." She looked out at the city lights. Grant was out there somewhere. He was probably reading the article right now. He was probably choking on his scotch. "Let him freak out," she whispered. She typed back to Jessica. "Tell him you don't know where I am. Tell him I vanished." She wasn't ready to see Grant yet, not until she could buy and sell his entire world. And according to the file Pennyworth had given her, that would be sooner than he thought. The intercom on the desk buzzed. "Ms. Blackwood," the receptionist's voice came through. "There is a Mr. Charles Whitmore downstairs. He's demanding to come back up. He says he has information about your sordid past that the board needs to hear." She walked over to the desk and pressed the button. "Let him scream at the lobby walls," she said, "and call the police if he trespasses." But a cold knot formed in her stomach. Whitmore wasn't going to go quietly, and a man like that, desperate and humiliated, would look for allies. He would look for anyone who hated her as much as he did. He would look for Grant. Grant Sterling was not having a good week. He sat in the corner booth of the Griffin Club, a members-only establishment in Manhattan where the air smelled of old money and cigars. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his other hand clutching his phone. The headline on the screen mocked him for the 100th time that hour. From bankruptcy to billions, the Cinderella story of Audrey Blackwood. "She played me," Grant muttered to himself, the alcohol burning his throat. She knew. She had to know. He was replaying the last 6 months in his head. The failed business, the tears, the begging for a loan. It all seemed like a performance now. If she was Silas Blackwood's daughter, she must have had a trust fund, a safety net, something. She had watched him divorce her, watched him humiliate her, all while sitting on a winning lottery ticket. "Mr. Sterling." Grant looked up. A large man with a flushed face and a suit that looked slightly disheveled stood over him. It was Charles Whitmore. Grant recognized him from the business pages and from the chaotic news reports about the boardroom coup earlier that week. "Do I know you?" Grant asked, though he knew exactly who he was. "We share a mutual problem," Whitmore said, sliding into the booth without waiting for an invitation. He signaled the waiter for a double scotch. "Her name is Audrey." Grant straightened his tie. "I don't discuss my ex-wife with strangers." "She's not just your ex-wife anymore, Sterling. She's the woman who fired me from the company I built." Whitmore spat, his voice low and venomous. and she's the woman who is about to destroy your reputation." "My reputation is fine," Grant lied. "Is it?" Whitmore pulled a folded newspaper from his jacket pocket. Page 6. Rumors are already swirling. Did Grant Sterling leave the heiress because he couldn't handle a powerful woman? "You look like a fool, Grant. You look like the man who threw away a diamond because he thought it was glass." Grant's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want my company back," Whitmore said. "And you want your money?" "I have money." "You have debt," Whitmore corrected. "I have friends at the bank. I know Sterling Holloway is leveraged to the hilt. If Audrey decides to squeeze you, you're finished. But if we work together, we can stop her." Grant leaned in. "How?" "She owns 51% of the shares. It's a dictatorship." "She obtained those shares through inheritance," Whitmore whispered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "But the inheritance is contingent on her being of sound mind and character." Silas Blackwood was paranoid. He put clauses in everything. Whitmore took a sip of his drink and smiled. "You were married to her for 7 years. You know her secrets. You know about her mother's condition." Grant hesitated. "Evelyn has early onset dementia. It's genetic." "Exactly." Whitmore slammed his hand softly on the table. "We can argue that Audrey is displaying the same symptoms. Erratic behavior, delusions of grandeur. The bankruptcy caused a mental break. If we can prove she is mentally unfit to lead, the board can vote to suspend her voting rights and reinstall me as interim CEO." "And what do I get?" Grant asked. "If she is declared incompetent, her assets are frozen and placed under a conservatorship. As her former spouse, who was deceived about her financial status during the divorce proceedings, you can sue for a mistrial of the divorce. You could claim half the marital assets, which now include her inheritance. You could walk away with $6 billion. Grant felt a rush of adrenaline. $6 billion. It was a number so large it didn't feel real. He thought about Chloe, his new girlfriend, who had been nagging him about a yacht. He thought about the partners at his firm looking down on him. "She humiliated me," Grant said, justifying it to himself. "She lied to me by omission. That's fraud." "So," Whitmore extended a meaty hand. "Are we partners?" Grant looked at the hand. He knew this was dirty. He knew it was cruel. Audrey had never hurt him. She had loved him. But his pride was wounded, and his greed was starving. He shook Whitmore's hand. "Let's take her down." The Blackwood Winter Gala was the social event of the season. It was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the Temple of Dender. The room was bathed in blue light, filled with senators, tech moguls, and celebrities. Audrey stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the sea of sharks. "You look like a weapon," Solange, her stylist, whispered as she adjusted the hem of the dress. It was a custom Versace gown, black velvet that absorbed the light, with a neckline that plunged dangerously low and a slit that went up to her thigh. Around her neck was the Blackwood diamond, a 30-carat stone that her father had bought in an auction in 1990. "I feel like bait," Audrey muttered. "That is the point," Pennyworth said, stepping up beside her in a tuxedo. "Whitmore and Grant have been busy. They filed an emergency injunction this afternoon claiming you are mentally unfit to lead. They leaked a story to the Post about your mother's genetics." Audrey felt a flash of cold rage. They could attack her. They could attack her business. But bringing her mother into this? Using her illness as a weapon? "Is everything in place?" she asked. "The trap is set," Pennyworth confirmed. "They are both here. They believe they are going to serve you with the legal papers in front of the press. They want a public breakdown. Let's give them a show, then." She descended the stairs. The moment her foot touched the first step, the cameras flashed. 1,000 blinding lights. She didn't blink. She walked with the rhythm Pennyworth had taught her. Slow, deliberate, regal. She worked the room for an hour, shaking hands, smiling, accepting condolences for a father she never knew. She felt eyes on her constantly. Then the crowd parted. Grant walked toward her. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit perfectly, his hair styled, his smile practiced. On his arm was Chloe, looking nervous. Behind them, lurking like a shadow, was Charles Whitmore. The music seemed to quiet down. People sensed the confrontation. Phones came out. "Audrey," Grant said, his voice loud enough to carry. He stepped into her personal space. "You look expensive." "Grant," she said, keeping her face impassive. "I see you brought a +1 and a +2. She nodded at Whitmore. "We need to talk, Audrey," Grant said, his tone shifting to one of mock concern. "Charles and I are very worried about you. This sudden change, the stress. We know about the manic episodes." "Manic episodes?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling success these days?" "We know you're not well." Whitmore stepped forward, holding a manila envelope. "We have statements from your former employees about your erratic behavior before the bankruptcy. We have medical records regarding your genetic predisposition." The crowd gasped. This was a direct attack. "We're doing this because we care," Grant added, reaching for her arm. "Audrey, come with us quietly. Don't make a scene. The lawyers just want to make sure you're safe." He was trying to gaslight her. In front of 500 of the most powerful people in New York. He wanted her to scream, to cry, to look like the crazy ex-wife. Audrey looked at Grant's hand on her arm. Then she looked at the camera crews. She laughed. It was a soft, dry laugh. "Grant," she said, stepping back so his hand fell away. "You always did have terrible timing." She signaled to the DJ booth. The music cut out completely. The room went silent. "Since we are airing dirty laundry," she said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the temple, "let's talk about Sterling Holloway." Grant's smile faltered. "This isn't about business, Audrey. It's always about business," she corrected. "Arthur, the screen, please." Behind her, on the massive projection wall, usually reserved for art displays, a document appeared. It was a balance sheet. "This," she gestured to the screen, "is the financial standing of Grant's firm. As you can see, they are insolvent. They have been hiding losses in offshore shell companies for 3 years. Grant went pale. "That's private information. That's illegal." "It's not illegal if you own the debt," she said coldly. "And as of this morning, Blackwood Logistics purchased the distressed assets of Sterling Holloway. I own your firm, Grant. I own your building. I own your mortgage." She took a step toward him. He shrank back. "And you?" She turned to Whitmore. "You talk about fraud? Let's talk about the Port Side project." Another document flashed on the screen. "Charles Whitmore has been siphoning 3% of all shipping contracts into a private account in the Cayman Islands. It's not incompetence, Charles. It's embezzlement. The forensic accountants finished their audit an hour ago. The FBI is waiting at the exit." Whitmore dropped his glass. It shattered on the stone floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "This is a lie!" Whitmore screamed, his face turning purple. "She's crazy! She's hallucinating!" "Am I?" Audrey pulled a remote from her clutch and clicked it. A video played on the screen. It was grainy, security footage from the Griffin Club. It showed Grant and Whitmore shaking hands. The audio was crystal clear. "Whitmore, if we can prove she is mentally unfit, you could walk away with $6 billion. Grant, let's take her down." The gasp from the crowd was a physical wave. Chloe pulled her arm away from Grant as if he were on fire and stepped back into the crowd. Grant stood alone. He looked at the screen, then at her. His eyes were filled with absolute terror. He wasn't looking at his ex-wife anymore. He was looking at his executioner. "You wanted a divorce, Grant," she said, her voice low and hard. "You wanted a separation of assets. Well, you got it. I have the assets. You have nothing." She turned to the security team. "Please escort these gentlemen out. The police are waiting on Fifth Avenue." 2 guards grabbed Whitmore, who was sputtering and cursing. Grant didn't fight. He just stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, finding no words. He looked small. He looked like the day he walked out on her. But this time, he was the one leaving with nothing. As they dragged him away, he shouted one last thing. "I loved you. Audrey, I did it for us." She watched him disappear through the heavy doors. "No, Grant," she whispered to the empty air. "You loved yourself. I just paid the bill." She turned back to the stunned crowd. She smoothed her dress, raised her champagne glass, and smiled the smile of a woman who had just won a war. "My apologies for the interruption," she said. "Please enjoy the dessert. The tart is excellent." The applause started slowly, then erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was the applause of people who recognized power. Pennyworth stepped up to her side. "That was theatrical." "It was necessary," she said, her hand trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "Is it over? With Whitmore and Grant?" "Yes," Pennyworth said. "But the real work? That is just beginning. You just declared war on the old guard, Audrey. They won't forgive this." "Good," she said, taking a sip of champagne. "I'm not looking for forgiveness." Audrey thought the night was over. She thought she had won. But as she walked toward the balcony for some fresh air, a man stepped out from the shadows of an Egyptian pillar. He wasn't a board member. He wasn't a reporter. He was younger, perhaps 30, with dark eyes and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He was wearing a leather jacket over a t-shirt, completely out of place at a gala. "Nice show," he said. His voice was rough, American. "Who are you?" she asked, signaling for security. "Don't bother," he said, raising his hands. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to deliver a message." "From whom?" "From your father." She froze. "My father is dead." "Silas is dead," the man said. "But he wasn't the only one watching you. He had a partner, a silent partner." He reached into his jacket. Audrey flinched, but he only pulled out a black chess piece. A king. "Whitmore was just a pawn," the stranger said, tossing the piece to her. She caught it reflexively. It was heavy, made of obsidian. "You just cleared the board. Now the real game starts. The syndicate wants a meeting." "The syndicate?" "You didn't think Silas built an empire that big, legally, did you?" The man smirked. "Welcome to the family business, Audrey. Try not to get killed." He hopped over the balcony railing and vanished into the night before she could even scream. She looked down at the black king in her hand. On the bottom, etched in gold, was a single symbol. A serpent eating its own tail. Her father hadn't just left her a company. He had left her a criminal empire. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, but Audrey felt no warmth. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, turning the obsidian chess piece over in her hand. The syndicate. Arthur Pennyworth stood by the door. He looked older today. The victory at the gala had drained him. "You knew," she said. It wasn't a question. "I knew Silas walked a fine line," Pennyworth admitted, stepping into the room. "Blackwood Logistics moves cargo everywhere. Conflict zones, embargoed nations, black sites, When you control 40% of the world's shipping, you don't just deal with governments, Audrey. You deal with the people who buy governments. And this syndicate? They are the silent investors. They ensure the lanes stay open. They ensure the pirates look the other way. In exchange, they use our ships to move. Specialized inventory. She stood up, anger flaring. Drugs? Weapons? Information, Pennyworth said. Servers, prototypes, things that don't exist on paper. Silas wanted out. He spent the last 5 years trying to untangle the company from them. That's why he died. The heir left the room. He was murdered? It was ruled a heart attack, Pennyworth said carefully. But Silas had the heart of an ox. He was about to expose them. And then he was gone. Audrey walked to the window. The city looked different now. It wasn't a playground of opportunity. It was a grid of traps. She had destroyed Grant. She had destroyed Whitmore, but they were just mosquitoes. She was standing in a tank full of sharks. So, what do they want? She asked. They want to know if you are a partner, like your father was in the beginning, or a liability, like he became at the end. Pennyworth's voice trembled slightly. The man on the balcony. That was a messenger. If you refuse the meeting, they will crash the stock. They will leak documents that send you to federal prison. They will destroy everything you just fought for. She looked at the obsidian king, the symbol of the serpent eating its tail, Ouroboros, the cycle of destruction and rebirth. She could run. She had enough money now to disappear. She could buy an island, move her mother there, and live out her days in safety. But then she thought of Grant's face when he realized she had power. She thought of the way the board members looked at her, with fear and respect. She had spent her whole life being the nice girl, the victim, the waitress cleaning up other people's messes. She wasn't a waitress anymore. "Set up the meeting," she said. Pennyworth's eyes widened. "Audrey, these are dangerous men. You cannot negotiate with them." "I'm not going to negotiate, Arthur." She walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at her was sharp, cold, and beautiful. She wore her scars like diamonds. "I'm going to lead them." 1 week later. The meeting took place on a yacht in international waters. No phones, no names. 5 men and women sat around a glass table. They represented trillions of dollars in shadow assets. The man from the balcony, the one with the scar, stood in the corner, watching. Audrey walked in alone. She wore white, a stark contrast to their dark suits. It was a statement. I have nothing to hide. "Miss Blackwood," a woman with a Russian accent said. She didn't offer a hand. "You have made quite a noise in New York. We prefer silence." "Noise is necessary when you are cleaning house," she replied, taking the seat at the head of the table. "You are young," an older American man grunted. "You don't understand the ecosystem. Your father tried to change the terms. It didn't end well." "My father tried to leave," she corrected. "I have no intention of leaving." She placed the obsidian king on the table. The sound of the heavy stone against the glass silenced them. "I know what you move through my ports," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "I know about the server farms in Reykjavik. I know about the prototype drones moving through Singapore. You need Blackwood logistics. Without my ships, your network goes dark in 48 hours. "We can find other ships," the Russian woman threatened. "No, you can't," Audrey smiled. "Because I just bought the 2 largest competitors in the Pacific. As of this morning, I control 65% of the lanes you use. If you want to move anything, you move it through me." The room went deadly quiet. They hadn't expected her to double down. They expected her to beg for her life. "This is blackmail," the American spat. "This is leverage. she said. "I am doubling your transport fees, and in exchange, I am offering you something my father never did." "And what is that?" "Stability," she said. "My father had a conscience. I have a business plan. I don't care what you move. I care that it arrives on time, and I care that my cut is deposited in Zurich by noon." The scarred man in the corner chuckled. The Russian woman looked at her for a long time. She was searching for fear. She found none. Slowly she nodded. "Welcome to the table, Miss Blackwood." Audrey returned to New York a ghost. The press still hounded her, but she never gave interviews. She visited the prison once, minimum security, white collar. Grant was sitting in the visitation room. He looked terrible. His hair was thinning, his skin sallow. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by a drab jumpsuit. He picked up the phone on the other side of the glass. "Audrey," he choked out. "Please, you have to help me. Whitmore set me up. I didn't know about the embezzlement. I can't be in here." She looked at him. She tried to find the love she used to feel. She tried to find the pain, but there was nothing. He was just a stranger who used to know her name. "You're not in there because of Whitmore, Grant," she said softly. "You're in there because you bet against me." "I'm sorry," he wept, pressing his hand to the glass. "I'm so sorry. I love you." "I know," she said. She stood up and placed her hand on the glass, just for a second. But love doesn't pay the rent. She hung up the phone. She walked out of the prison and into the waiting limousine. Pennyworth was waiting with a file. "The acquisition of Triton Global is complete," he said. "And your mother is settling in well at the clinic. She asked for you today." "I'll fly out tonight," she said. As the car pulled away, merging into the traffic of the city she now owned, Audrey looked at the skyline. She had lost her husband. She had lost her innocence. She had lost the simple life where a $20 tip was a good night. But she had found something else. She touched the obsidian king in her pocket. She had found her kingdom. And that is how Audrey went from counting tips at a diner to controlling the world's most dangerous shipping empire. She lost the man who didn't value her, but she gained a crown that no one can ever take away. Grant learned the hard way that you never kick a woman when she's down, because she might just be kneeling to pick up a weapon. What do you think? Did Audrey make the right choice by joining the syndicate? Or should she have exposed them and risked everything? And be honest, would you have visited Grant in prison or left him to rot without a word? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and power, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And subscribe for more dramatic stories every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you leave behind.